So how this MVC will work basically in ASP.NET MVC code. Now I'm going to give a diagram. So this is my application layer. Okay. All my ASP.NET will be deployed and started processing in my web server. How many applications can I have in a server? What is web server? A server which processes the request. A server which will have an application to be installed. A server will have an application to be installed. That means if you look into here, this is my web server. This is my web server. In the web server, I'm going to deploy the web server. I'm going to deploy 3 different applications. The web server, I'm going to deploy how many applications? Like that, in a single server, I can deploy n number of applications. Let's take an example of this. Here I have a product application, which will maintain everything as related to product. Okay, this is a separate web application. The product application will be called as a web application. It could be developed in Java, it could be developed in .NET, it could be developed in Angular, it could be developed in React. All these are treated as a web application. You got my point? So to connect this product application from your browser, I have multiple browsers. Browser 1, browser 2, browser 3. Got my point? You all clear? Say yes or no?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So here I have a client 1. I have a client 1. Here I have a client 2. Here I have a client 3. These are all coming from browser. Okay. Now, this client 1 make a request to product application. The product application receive the request, process the request, send a response back to the client 1. Similar way, client 2 also will go and call a request. When you make a request, see, every individual mobile or every individual laptop containing browser will be treated as a client. Here, a server, second point, a server can contain n number of web applications. N number of web applications. Where this web application to be installed? Where this web application to be installed? Come on.
Server.
Web server.
Okay, so web application will be installed in a web server. Web application will be installed in a web server. Got my point? One second. Hello. Hello. పంపిస్తారు ఏమైంది 3 రోజులుగా ఫోన్ ఎత్తలేదంట Sorry, guys. So a server can contain n number of web application. Web application can be installed in a web server. Okay. So how to process this server? How to process this application? What is Meghalaya? Judy?
No, sir. Someone asked which state. That's why I replied.
Who's that?
Uh, I think Manish Singh.
Manish, don't ask like that, please.
He's not from admin. I thought he's from.
No, he is not from admin. Manish Singh.
Oh, okay, sir.
Third point. I'm sorry. I got disturbed. Okay, fine. So web client makes a request to the product web application. This is your first point. How the application request response will happen is the web client. See, I have one application is in server. Are you able to see my video? The one application is deployed in my server. Another application, a client browser will make a request to the web application. Web application process the request, and once the application has been processed, send the response back to the client browser. Okay, so what is your fourth point? Web application will receives a request in the form of HTTP context, where in which HTTP request, where the request contain header and body. Okay, so how the request will be processed? Yesterday we discussed, right? Whenever you make a request from the browser, the server receives the request. Okay, once the server receives the request, that request will be in the form of header and body. How that will be happen, I will show you. Here, let me take a new window. Assume you have a web application here. Okay, this is your web application saying that product application. Got my point? You will have a product application. This product application will try to make a client request from here. We'll try to make a client request here. Okay, this is my client request. Now, what is the format the request will go here? Can anyone tell me? The request always flows in a format of what? The request always goes in a format of HTTP. Request always go in a format of HTTP request. Whenever you make a request from client browser, the request always flows through HTTP request. You should carefully understand. Okay. In this HTTP request, you will have two things. One is header and body. In this HTTP request, you will have two things. What is that? Header and body. Come on, guys. Will you be able to hear me or not?
Yes,
Speak
sir.
out. Others.
Yes, sir. Able to hear me.
Other.
Yes, sir.
Another one is body. Sir, can you prove me how the request will go through? How do I say that this is my request and that request will go to my product application? Product application process the request, send the response back. When he sends the response back, you see here, I will have HTTP response. I will have what? HTTP response. How this HTTP response will come? I will show you. HTTP response. And here in the HTTP response, you see here, there is a header and body. Again, the response will send you the header and body. Again, I will send you the header and body. Okay, this will be your response. From product application will send the response. That response will go back to your client browser. This is how the typical request response will be processed. What is the type of data this HTTP request and response will be passed? What are all the type of data it can be passed, which we discussed yesterday, right? Sai, Pranit, Pooja, Ramkrishna. What is the
XML and
response we yesterday processed? The response. The HTTP response for fifth point, HTTP request, response, request or HTTP response always in a format of JSON. Always in a format of JSON or XML. You got my point? Any application, .NET can able to understand JSON. Java can able to understand JSON. To communicate Java application to .NET application, we need a pipeline, an interlinking of data. The data always in a format of XML or JSON. Let me prove you this. I will open a Visual Studio .NET. This is my .NET Visual Studio. Yes, sir. JSON format CI/CD pipeline. Ramkrishna, CI/CD pipeline will come later. Don't worry. So here, continue with code. Let me try a small work, new project. I'm selecting ASP.NET Core empty. There I'm going to say sample application. Sample application. And location I'm going to use. This is how I need to configure my application. Don't worry, I will teach you from scratch. Here I'm going to say microservice batch. Microservice batch. Okay, I'm selecting the folder. Next, I'm removing the configuration. Create. What will happen? It will create a web application for me. Pranit, are you there? Pranit?
Sir, there's
You tell me how to create a response and request in ASP.NET Core, which we already discussed, right? Now in the program.cs file, you see, this is the only code it will return hello world for us. Now you see, I'm running. I don't have any code, only 4 lines of codes I have. It will run in the browser. One second. Zoom IT. Yes. Okay, guys, some issue. I will download that later point of time. Now, if you see here, inspect element, you see here there is a application in the network. Now, when I refresh, when you click on this, you see there is an header. Will you all able to see me header? Say yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You see what is that URL is there? What is the type of method is there? In that you will have response header and request header. You see there is a request header.
Yes, sir.
Will you able to see me? Say yes or no.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Others,
Yes, yes, yes.
you see here there is a request header. See, it get what type of data it is, and you will have a response header. What type of text it is, plain text, date, server, everything will be available. Or you got my point? So these are all called as raw data. Now, if you look into the response, you will get only the content. So, as per our discussion in the diagram, The HTTP request as an header, HTTP response as an header. Where this header information are coming from? It is coming from the browser. Now you see here. See, I inspected an element. I inspected an element. If you go to sources, not network, nothing is there. When I refresh, you get a localhost file. It is coming from the server. This localhost file coming from the server. The moment it comes from the server, when you click on it, it contains headers, it contains response. You got my point? In the request, you will have a response header as well as request header. You got my point? What data you are passing from the browser, what data you are receiving from the server. Everything will be available here. Anybody have any questions so far? Pooja, Ramakrishna, Sudarshini.
No, sir.
Sudarshini? Hello, who's that? Sai,
Yes,
can
sir.
you please unmute? Bhargavi,
Yes,
Amar,
sir.
others, Praneeth.
Yes, yes, sir. We
Okay,
understand.
so this is how this request will comes into picture. Okay, now coming back to MVC, if you want, you can take the diagram. Now you all understand, right? So come to the nodes. In the nodes, whenever we make a request, the request will be processed. The request will be processed in the server and send the response back to the client browser. Client browser using HTTP response, where HTTP response contain header and body. I got my point. This is how we are going to work in my microservice architecture. Anything you are going to pass data in a format of JSON with header and body. Clear my point? Everybody clear? Say yes or no.
Yeah, clear,
Type
sir.
in the chat. Everybody type in the chat. Sudarshini. Say yes or no. Pooja. Who is Pooja? Yes, sir. Sudarshini, yes, sir. Okay, fine. Amara, do you understand? Judy?
Yes, sir.
Amar Venkat?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes, I
Ramakrishna, do you
understand.
understand? Yeah. Sai, you understand clearly?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Understand.
Fine. Now, let's you take this diagram as a screenshot so that I can go for another diagram. I'll give you 2 minutes of time. Take this diagram as a diagram. If you have a note, you can draw this diagram. I'll give you 2 minutes. Once done, let me know. Okay. Now I am going to take one more session. Now I am going to explain MVC architecture. Can I move forward? Say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now within the web server, okay, within a web server, I am going to talk about MVC architecture. Okay. What is MVC stands for? MVC stands for Model View Controller. Okay, MVC stands for Model View Controller. Or you got my point? Anything you want to learn MVC, you need to understand model, you need to understand view, you need to understand controller. Now go to the diagram. Assume you are getting a request. Okay, in a web application, it has been deployed. This is my web application. Okay, whenever you make a request, whenever we make a request, that request will come and hit into controller. The request will come and hit into controller. Controller. Okay. Any request comes from client, it will by default will hit into controller. So what is the purpose of controller? What is the purpose of controller here? Come
To
on.
get the request from
We have to write
It is
all the
used to receive or accept the request from the client browser. Am I right or wrong? Whatever the request browser is giving, my controller will receive the request. Or you got my point? The moment it receives the request, what will happen? It will try to process the request. It will send the request to service layer. It will send the request to service layer. So immediately what layer we have? We have a one more layer called service layer. We have a layer called service layer. Now listen carefully. This is my layer called service layer. Okay, controller immediately pass the request to service layer. So what will happen? Controller accept the request and immediately pass the service layer. That is the two things. Now what will happen? Service layer again will talk to a one more layer called what layer? One more layer called what layer, ma? This is my main layer. Okay, this will be call it as a this layer will be call it as a repository. Okay. Repository layer. Okay. Now the repository layer will talk to the database. Repository layer will talk to the database. Now the repository layer will talk to the database, give the response back. Again, the service layer will give the response to the controller. Can I give the same response back to the view with the help of controller? No, it is not possible. For that, you require a layer called view layer. You require a layer called view layer. Okay. You require a layer called what?
View.
View layer. Okay. So once you receive the response, that response will not send to the browser directly. It will send through view layer. This view layer will send the response back. So where I'm getting from the HTTP request, how do I detect the HTTP request? The HTTP request comes here. HTTP request comes here. How I'm getting the response back? The response comes from view. Now we all understand how the MVC works. Say yes or no.
Yes, sir.
Everybody.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ramakrishna, I will tell. Don't worry. Just listen this one first. Okay. So here, HTTP request, whenever the request comes here, whenever you make a request, this request will comes to controller. Controller will catch the request, send the request to the service layer. Service layer again will come to repository layer. Repository layer will process the request, again give the response back to the service layer. Once the response has been detected by service layer, it will go back to the controller. Now controller is having a response, but you cannot directly send the response, so that you are going to use a view layer. And that view layer will send a response back as a HTTP response. This is the typical architecture of MVC. Anybody have any questions on this MVC architecture? Everybody clear with the MVC architecture? Say yes or no.
Yes,
See,
sir.
you need to speak. If you are not speaking, I can't do anything. Hello.
Yes, sir. Understand, sir.
Sai, Swadarshini, Ramakrishna, Bhargavi,
Yes, sir. Understand.
Amar,
Clear, sir.
Sudarshini, Judy. You understand, Judy?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. So this is how your request and response will be processed. All these layers is having a data. Why you need to make a request with the help of data or normal? Why you are processing the request? Can anyone tell me why we are processing the request? Come on.
To get
Why do
the
we need to
data.
process the request?
To get the data and to display into the view layer.
Okay. So here, these layers may not hold data. All these 4 layers may not hold data. For that, you required model layer. For that, you required a layer called model. You require a layer called model layer. Okay. What will happen? This model layer, whenever the request comes, this model layer connect with the controller. This model layer connect with the view. This service layer connect with the view. This repository layer connect with the view. Here, In controller, service, repository, all are treated as a class containing methods. Those who are not aware of OOPS concept, go through my videos. Okay. The controller layer will contain only methods. Okay. You will have a method internally called a service layer. Or you got my point? So what is the purpose of controller layer by default? Controller layer will receive a request and transfer the request to service layer. That is the first purpose. The controller layer will be there. Second purpose, controller layer, after receiving a response, send the data to the view. Okay. So this is the only purpose of controller layer. Anybody have any question on controller layer? Anybody have any question? Amar, Bhargavi, Judy, Ramakrishna, Sai?
No doubts.
No, sir.
Sai, Bhargavi, Ramakrishna, Swadarshini.
No, sir.
Okay. The model layer is not for purpose of fetching the data. Model layer is only holding the data. Okay. Model layer is only to hold the data. Only the repository layer will connect to the database. Okay. Ramakrishna. Model layer only connect to the database. It will not fetch the data. Be clear with that. Okay. Now the sixth point is service layer. This layer is used to process a request with the help of business validation and logic. Let's take an example. I'll tell you an example. You buy a product of 1,000 rupees. Or you got my point? Or you are buying a product of 12,000 rupees. You need to add a GST of 18%. This logic will be built in this layer. So what is your value? 1,800, 360, which is 2,160. So total value is 14,460. This logic need to be built in service layer. You should not build this logic in the controller. Now you all understand why do we need a service layer?
For logic
You all
building.
understand? Building logic and validation. Or you got my point? So for that, you are going to use a service layer. In service layer also, it will only contain methods. It will only contain methods. Whereas in the repository layer, after processing the request, this layer is used to interact with any kind of database. Any kind of database. Example, SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, all these are different databases. Okay, so all these are different databases. What type of action to be performed? Insert, update, delete, get a particular product and select. All these queries will be performed against the database. For that, we are using a layer called repository layer. Clear my point? Now, finally, model layer. This layer is used to hold the data from request to response. I got my point. The data will be accessed across all the layers. Across all the layers. That is the beauty of model layer and purpose. Finally, we will have a layer called view layer. Number one, this layer is used to present the data in a user understandable format. User understandable format. Whatever the data you are receiving from the controller as a response, that response you are going to bind through HTML. That is the purpose we are using view layer. Anybody have any questions so far with the architecture and notes? Feel free to ask. Yes, I.
Like you said, controller layer is there, right?
Yes.
So that it is also one of the layer in the architecture.
Yes.
Okay.
Controller is one of the layer in architecture. You see here in the project, do you see any controller here? Sai?
No, sir.
Because I'm going to define the controller on my own. Got the point? I'm
Okay.
not going to create any controller. With the scratch development, we are going to start from day after tomorrow. I need to go for a depth understanding of this. And then we can go ahead with this. If you want, you can take this diagram.
Yes, sir.
And one more thing. Let me open my MS Word Paint. Word document. So this is my notes. I will give you end of the session. This notes I can give you. This is my architecture. Will you all able to see the architecture?
Yes.
Will you all able to see my architecture?
Yes, sir.
Now you see here, user is making a request with the port number 8080. The request will comes to the middleware. That middleware will connect to the controller. Controller will call a service layer. Service layer will call a repository layer. That repository layer will send a response back. Who is connecting to the database? Whether my service or controller or view or middleware. Which layer is talking to the database?
Repository layer.
Come again?
Repository.
Repository layer. Okay. The moment the repository is talking to the database, that layer will send the value that will come from the view. The view will return back to the response. So that is the beauty of this architecture. If you want, I can share this architecture in an image. Copy, where to paste. To take this, download this one from your laptop or desktop. You all receive this? Please confirm me. Say yes or no.
Receive.
Fine.
Yes, sir.
Now, in this architecture, I have clearly explained each layer what it will do. We'll discuss this in detail by tomorrow. What are all the things I'm going to do here? What are all the things I'm going to do here? What are all the things I'm going to do each layer? Everything will be described. And then we will go for implementing the logic. Is it okay? Anybody have any questions? Sai, Pavan, Bhargavi, Sudarshini.
Yes.
Come again? Hello? Hello?
No,
Clear,
sir.
sir.
Clear, right? Now take this diagram. Keep it put it in chat. Someone can take and put it in chat. So tomorrow, we are planning to discuss each layer in detail and then write certain line of code that how to build all the layers, how we can create the project. Okay? You all clear with me?
Yes, sir. Sir, can you provide the demo of the project which we are going to implement?
No, it's a e-store project, end-to-end with the microservice.
Okay. Do you have any working application?
No, I have only MEC application. Yesterday I showed you, not an Angular application. Okay?
But are we going to use MVC here because we are using Angular, right?
Did you attend yesterday's thing?
Yes, sir. I attend.
So what we discussed? Let's wait. Let
We
me
have this.
unmute so that you guys can speak freely, comfortably. Just a second. Let me stop recording.